The grain silo stood like a sentinel against the amber sky of New Mexico territory, and somewhere inside its wooden belly, a woman was trying not to breathe too loudly while three men searched for her with murder in their eyes. Penelope Ashford pressed her back against the rough planks, feeling the wheat kernels shift beneath her feet with every tiny movement. She had climbed through the upper hatch 20 minutes ago, lowering herself into the darkness with trembling arms, and now she was buried up to her waist in grain, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might give her away. The men outside were shouting to each other, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the structure. "She came this way, I know she did," one of them yelled. "Tom saw her running past the livestock pens." "Maybe she made it to the trees," another voice suggested, but it sounded uncertain. "Check everything. Mr. Garrett wants her found before sundown. He said she stole something valuable, and he means to get it back." Penelope clutched the leather satchel tighter against her chest, feeling the papers inside crinkle slightly. She had not stolen anything. The documents were rightfully hers, proof that her father had owned the land that Marcus Garrett now claimed as his own. Her father had died 3 months ago, found at the bottom of a ravine with his neck broken. Everyone said it was an accident, that his horse had spooked, but Penelope knew better. She had heard Garrett talking to his men at the funeral, heard them laughing about how the old man had not wanted to sell. The sound of boots on wood made her freeze. Someone was climbing the ladder to the upper platform of the silo. She sank lower into the grain, feeling it press against her ribs, filling her nose with the dusty smell of harvest. The hatch above her creaked open, and afternoon sunlight streamed down in a golden shaft. "Nothing up here but wheat," the man called down. She would not be stupid enough to hide in here anyway. She would suffocate in all this grain. The hatch slammed shut again, plunging her back into dimness. Penelope waited, counting her breaths, listening as the footsteps retreated. She heard the men mount their horses and ride off, their voices fading into the distance. Still, she did not move. Garrett's men were clever, and they might double back, expecting her to emerge too soon. Time passed slowly in the darkness. The grain seemed to grow heavier around her legs, and she realized with a flutter of panic that she was sinking. The kernels were flowing like water, pulling her down inch by inch. She tried to lift her foot, but the suction was too strong. The more she struggled, the faster she sank. Within minutes, the wheat was at her chest, then her shoulders. "Help," she called out, her voice swallowed by the grain. "Somebody help me." The words felt foolish even as she spoke them. She was miles from town, on the old Hendricks farm that had been abandoned for years. No one would hear her. No one would come. She would die here, suffocating in the darkness, and Garrett would take her father's land without anyone to oppose him. The grain reached her chin, and she tilted her head back, gasping for air. Tears ran down her cheeks. She thought of her father, of his gentle hands and his love of the land. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years past. Soon she would join them, then she heard it. The creak of the ladder, footsteps on the platform above. "Please," she screamed with the last of her strength. "Please help me. I am drowning in here." The hatch flew open and a silhouette appeared against the bright sky. "Hold on," a man's voice called down. "Do not move, do not struggle, you will sink faster." "I cannot help it," she sobbed. "Yes, you can. Listen to me, be still. I am coming down." She heard the rustle of rope, and then the man was lowering himself through the hatch, using a length of line tied to a beam above. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders that blocked out the light as he descended. When he reached her level, still suspended by the rope, he reached out and grabbed her under her arms. "Hold on to me," he said. His voice was steady, calm, nothing like the panic that churned in her belly. "Hold tight and do not let go." She wrapped her arms around his neck, dropping the satchel in her desperation. The grain sucked at her legs, unwilling to release its prize, but the man was strong. He climbed hand over hand up the rope, hauling both their weights with a determination that seemed almost superhuman. Her legs came free with a sound like a gasp, and then they were rising through the golden shaft of light, up toward the hatch and the blue sky beyond. He pulled them both onto the platform, and they lay there gasping like fish on a dock. Penelope's whole body shook with delayed terror. The man sat up first, coiling his rope with practiced movements. "You nearly died down there," he said. "What were you thinking, hiding in a grain silo?" She looked at him properly for the first time. He was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, and his hands bore the calluses of hard work. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days. "I was not thinking," she admitted, her voice still shaky. "I was running. I just needed to hide." Running from what? Or should I say who? She hesitated. She did not know this man. He could be one of Garrett's people. He could turn her in before she made it another mile. "I saw those men searching earlier," he continued, watching her face. "3 riders moving like they were hunting something. I figured whatever they wanted, I probably wanted to keep from them. Marcus Garrett's men have a reputation. You know them." Everyone in Placitas knows Garrett and his hired thugs. He has been buying up land all over this part of New Mexico territory, and he is not particular about how he convinces people to sell. The man stood and offered her his hand. "I am Lucas Callahan. I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles south of here." She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Penelope Ashford. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Robert Ashford's daughter. I heard about your father. I am sorry. He was a good man." "He was murdered," she said flatly. "And now Garrett wants to kill me too." Lucas studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the ladder. "We should not talk here. Those men might come back. My horse is tied up near the barn. Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then let us get out of here before someone decides to check this place again." They climbed down the ladder, and Penelope looked back up at the silo with a shudder. Lucas noticed and touched her shoulder gently. "You are safe now. I will not let anything happen to you." She wanted to believe him, but she had learned not to trust easily. Still, he had saved her life. That had to count for something. His horse was a sturdy chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. Lucas mounted first, then pulled Penelope up behind him. She hesitated only a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist. He was solid and warm, and despite everything, she felt a flutter of something that was not quite fear. They rode south through the scrubland, keeping to the low places where they would not be silhouetted against the sky. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the landscape in shades of orange and red. Penelope had lived in New Mexico territory all her life, but she had never appreciated its harsh beauty quite like this, when every moment felt stolen from death. Lucas's ranch appeared as they crested a low hill. It was modest but well kept, with a small house, a barn, and several corrals where cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone else was home. "My younger brother Henry lives with me," Lucas explained as they approached, "and we have a cook named Maria who comes in most days. They are good people. You can trust them." They dismounted in front of the house, and Lucas led his mare to the barn to unsaddle her. Penelope followed, unsure of what else to do. Her whole world had collapsed in the span of a single day, and she felt unmoored like a boat whose anchor line had been cut. "You said Garrett wants to kill you," Lucas said as he worked the cinch free. "Why? What did you do?" "I found proof that my father owned the land Garrett claims. Documents showing that my father bought it legally 15 years ago, with witnesses, and everything recorded properly. Garrett has been saying my father never had title, that he was just a squatter, but it is a lie. With these papers I can fight him in court. Had, Lucas said quietly. You said you found them, past tense. Penelope's heart sank. I dropped my satchel in the silo. When I was drowning, I had to let it go. Lucas finished with his horse and turned to face her. Then we will go back and get it. Are you insane? Garrett's men could still be searching the area, which is exactly why they will not expect us to return tonight. We will wait until full dark, ride back, and retrieve your documents. You cannot fight Garrett without proof, and he cannot be allowed to keep stealing land that does not belong to him. She stared at him. Why would you risk yourself for me? You do not even know me. Your father once helped me when I needed it, Lucas said. 5 years back, I was trying to buy this ranch, but I was short on the down payment. Robert Ashford loaned me the difference, and he did not charge interest. He said a young man trying to make an honest living deserved a fair chance. I paid him back every cent, but I never forgot his kindness. Helping his daughter is the least I can do. Tears stung Penelope's eyes. It sounded exactly like something her father would have done. Thank you, she whispered. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his serious face. Come on, let us get you fed before we go playing thieves in the night. Maria makes a stew that could raise the dead. The house was warm and welcoming, with whitewashed walls and simple furniture that spoke of comfort rather than wealth. A young man who looked to be about 20 was setting the table when they entered. He had the same dark hair as Lucas but lighter eyes, more hazel than gray. Henry, this is Penelope Ashford, Lucas said. She will be staying with us for a while. Penelope, my brother Henry. Henry nodded politely, his eyes curious but not prying. Pleased to meet you, miss. Maria left stew on the stove and fresh bread in the basket. She said to tell you she would be back tomorrow morning. Perfect. Set another place, would you? They sat down to eat, and Penelope realized she had not had a proper meal since breakfast. The stew was rich with beef and vegetables, and the bread was crusty and warm. For a few minutes, she let herself forget about Garrett and his men, about the danger she was in, and just enjoyed the simple pleasure of food and safety. So what is the plan? Henry asked, looking between Lucas and Penelope. Lucas explained the situation while they ate, laying out his idea to return to the silo after dark. Henry listened intently, then nodded. I will come with you. 3 sets of eyes are better than 2, and if Garrett's men do show up, you will need backup. It could be dangerous, Lucas warned, and letting Garrett get away with murder is not. Henry's jaw was set in a stubborn line that Penelope was beginning to recognize as a family trait. They finished their meal and prepared for the journey. Lucas gave Penelope a jacket that had belonged to his mother, along with a canteen of water. Henry saddled 2 more horses, and they set out under a sky full of stars, the moon just beginning to rise in the east. The ride back to the Hendricks farm took longer in the darkness, but the horses knew the way, and Lucas was a skilled navigator. Penelope rode beside him, acutely aware of his presence, of the way he sat his horse with easy confidence, of the occasional glance he gave her to make sure she was keeping up. Why did Garrett kill your father? He asked quietly, his voice carrying just to her over the sound of hoofbeats. I know it is a hard question, but I need to understand what we are dealing with. Penelope took a breath. There is a railroad company planning to build a line through this part of New Mexico territory. My father's land sits right in the path they want to use. If Garrett can claim ownership before the railroad finalizes its route, he stands to make a fortune selling them the right-of-way. My father would not sell at any price. He loved that land. So Garrett decided to take it by force. Yes. And now he is trying to erase any evidence that my father ever owned it. If I disappear, and the documents disappear, who will contradict his claim? Most people do not even know my father bought that land legally. He was a quiet man who kept to himself. They fell silent as they approached the Hendricks farm. Lucas signaled for them to slow, and they dismounted a quarter-mile away, tying the horses to a stand of cottonwoods. They would cover the rest of the distance on foot. The silo loomed against the stars, dark and silent. No lights showed anywhere on the property, and no horses stood waiting. It appeared deserted, but Lucas moved with caution, keeping to the shadows, signaling for Penelope and Henry to do the same. They reached the base of the silo, and Lucas paused, listening. Satisfied that they were alone, he began to climb the ladder. Henry followed, and Penelope came last, her heart pounding. Heights had never bothered her before, but after nearly dying in this place, every rung felt precarious. At the top, Lucas tied his rope securely and lowered himself through the hatch once more. Penelope and Henry watched from above, holding their breath. Minutes passed. Then Lucas called up softly, "I found it, pulling myself up now." He emerged with the leather satchel clutched in one hand, covered in wheat dust but intact. Penelope wanted to cry with relief. She took it from him and checked inside. The documents were still there, slightly crumpled but readable. "We should go," Henry whispered urgently. "I do not like being out here in the open." They climbed down and hurried back to the horses. Behind them, the silo stood empty once more, keeping its secrets. They were halfway back to Lucas's ranch when they heard the sound of riders approaching fast from the north. Lucas swore under his breath and urged his horse into a faster pace. "There are too many of them," Henry said, looking back. "At least 6 horses." "The canyon," Lucas said. "We can lose them in the canyon." They veered west toward a maze of arroyos and small canyons that cut through the landscape. Penelope followed Lucas blindly, trusting him to know the way in the darkness. Behind them, shouts rang out as Garrett's men spotted their movement and gave chase. The canyon swallowed them, narrow walls rising on either side. Lucas led them through a series of turns that seemed random but clearly were not. He had grown up in this country and knew every twist and fold of the land. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, confused, and then faded entirely. They emerged on the far side of the canyon system and paused to let the horses catch their breath. Penelope's hands shook as she stroked her mount's neck. "That was too close," Henry said. "They know we are onto them now," Lucas agreed. "Garrett will not stop. He cannot afford to let Penelope reach a judge with those documents." "So, what do we do?" Penelope asked. Lucas looked at her, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. "We take the fight to him. Tomorrow we ride into Placitas and file your claim with the territorial court. We do it publicly with witnesses, so Garrett cannot make you disappear quietly. Once the documents are on record, killing you would not do him any good." "He will try to stop us before we reach town," she said, "probably. Which is why we will leave before dawn and take the long route through the mountains. It will add hours to the journey, but it will be harder for him to ambush us." They rode the rest of the way back to the ranch in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Penelope could not help but notice how different Lucas was from any man she had known. He was decisive but not reckless, brave but not foolhardy. He listened when she spoke, and he treated her like an equal rather than a helpless woman who needed to be managed. Back at the ranch house, Henry went to check on the livestock while Lucas built up the fire in the parlor. Penelope stood warming her hands, still clutching the satchel like a lifeline. "You should try to get some sleep," Lucas said gently. "We have a hard ride ahead of us tomorrow." "I do not think I can sleep." "I understand, but you should try anyway. There is a bedroom down the hall, second door on the right, It was my mother's before she passed. You will be comfortable there." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the kindness in his face, the worry lines around his eyes. "Why are you doing this? And do not say it is just because of what my father did for you. This is more than repaying a debt." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe it started that way," he admitted. "But somewhere between pulling you out of that silo and watching you face down the idea of Garrett's men catching us, it became about more than duty. You are brave, Penelope. You have been through hell today, and you are still standing, still fighting." "That means something. You mean something." Her breath caught. "Lucas, you do not have to say anything. Just know that I will see this through to the end, whatever it takes. You are not alone in this fight." She nodded, not trusting her voice. The emotions of the day were catching up with her, and she felt tears threatening. "Thank you," she managed, "for everything. Get some rest. I will wake you a few hours before dawn." The bedroom was simple but clean, with a soft bed and quilts that smelled faintly of lavender. Penelope lay down fully clothed, the satchel beside her, and despite her certainty that sleep would be impossible, she was unconscious within minutes. She woke to Lucas's gentle hand on her shoulder and the smell of coffee brewing. The world outside the window was still dark, but she could see the faint promise of dawn on the eastern horizon. "Time to go," Lucas said softly. They gathered in the kitchen, where Henry had laid out bread, cheese, and cold meat for a quick breakfast. They ate standing up, too tense for leisurely conversation. Lucas checked his rifle and made sure everyone had full canteens. Henry wore a pistol on his hip, and Lucas offered one to Penelope as well. "You know how to shoot. My father taught me." "Good. I hope you will not need it, but better to have it just in case." They rode out under a sky turning gray with approaching dawn, heading east toward the mountains. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and creosote. Penelope felt oddly alert despite her short sleep, her senses heightened by a mix of fear and something else she could not quite name. Lucas set a steady pace, not too fast but not dawdling either. They would need the horse's strength for the mountain passes. As they rode, he explained the route, pointing out landmarks and describing the terrain ahead. "The trail through the mountains is steep in places, but it comes out just north of Placida's. If Garrett's men are watching the main road, they will not see us coming." "Unless they are watching the north road too," Henry pointed out. "It is a risk," Lucas agreed, "but a calculated one. Garrett cannot watch every approach to town." The sun rose as they climbed into the foothills, painting the rocks in shades of gold and red. Penelope had always loved the New Mexico landscape, but she was seeing it differently now, through Lucas's eyes. He pointed out a golden eagle soaring overhead, a patch of wildflowers growing in an unlikely crevice, a spring where they could water the horses. He loved this land as much as her father had, she realized. It was part of him in a way that went beyond ownership. They stopped to rest the horses around mid-morning in a sheltered canyon where a small stream ran over smooth stones. Henry kept watch while Lucas and Penelope sat in the shade of an overhang, sharing water and dried beef. "Tell me about your ranch," Penelope said. "How long have you owned it?" 5 years, like I mentioned. Before that, I worked for other people, saving every penny. Henry and I lost our parents when he was just a boy. Our father died of pneumonia and our mother followed 6 months later. Some said she died of a broken heart, and maybe that is true. They loved each other something fierce. That must have been hard. It was. But it taught us to rely on each other. Henry is more than my brother. He is my best friend, my partner. This ranch belongs to both of us, even if it is in my name on paper." Lucas looked at her, a question in his eyes. "What about you? Do you have other family?" "Anyone who could help you with Garrett?" "No one. My mother was an only child and she died when I was 8. My father had a brother once, but they had a falling out years ago over something my father never wanted to talk about. I have not seen my uncle since I was a little girl. I doubt he even knows my father is dead. So you are alone. I was, she said quietly, until yesterday. Their eyes met and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. Lucas reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. You are not alone anymore, he said. No matter what happens with Garrett, you have friends now, you have us. Before she could respond, Henry whistled softly from his lookout position. Riders coming, from the east. They were on their feet instantly. Lucas scrambled up to where Henry crouched behind a boulder and Penelope followed. In the distance, she could see dust rising, the unmistakable sign of horses moving at speed. How many? Lucas asked. Hard to say, maybe 4 or 5. Could be anyone. Could be, Henry agreed. But I do not believe in that many coincidences. They waited, tense and silent, as the riders drew closer. When they were near enough to make out details, Lucas cursed softly. That is Garrett's man Tom in front, the one with the scar on his face. I would recognize him anywhere. How did they find us? Penelope breathed. Luck, probably. Or they have men watching all the routes out of this area. Lucas thought quickly. We cannot fight 5 men in the open. We need to lose them in the rocks. They mounted and rode deeper into the mountains, following game trails that twisted and turned through the rugged terrain. The riders behind them were gaining, but the narrow paths slowed everyone down, making pure speed less important than knowledge of the land. Lucas led them up a steep slope that seemed impossible for horses, but his mare took it with sure-footed determination. They emerged onto a flat mesa with sheer cliffs on 3 sides, and the trail they had just climbed on the 4th. We are trapped, Penelope said, panic rising in her throat. Not quite. Lucas pointed to a crack in the cliff face that she had not noticed at first. There is a passage through there. It is tight, but passable. My brother and I used to explore these mountains when we were younger. That passage leads down the other side of the ridge. They dismidged and led the horses to the crack. It was narrow, barely wide enough for a horse and completely invisible unless you knew it was there. They squeezed through single file, the rock walls pressing close on either side. Behind them, they could hear Garrett's men reaching the mesa. Where did they go? One man shouted. They did not ride off the cliff. Check for tracks. But the rock surface of the mesa held no tracks, and by the time the men found the crack in the cliff, Lucas, Henry, and Penelope were already descending the far side of the ridge. They emerged onto a different trail system entirely, one that ran parallel to their original route but several miles south. That should buy us some time, Lucas said as they remounted. Placitas is only a few more hours from here. They rode hard now, urgency overriding caution. The sun climbed high, beating down on them without mercy. Penelope's water ran low, and her back ached from the saddle, but she did not complain. They were so close to safety, so close to getting her father's documents on official record. Placitas appeared in the valley below them like a mirage, its adobe buildings clustered around a central plaza. The town was small but prosperous, a supply hub for the ranches and mines in the surrounding territory. Penelope had been here only a few times in her life, always with her father. They rode straight to the courthouse, a 2-story building on the east side of the plaza. Lucas helped Penelope dismount, his hands lingering on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, clutching the satchel. "Ready." Inside, the courthouse was cool and dim, a welcome relief from the heat. A clerk sat at a desk, copying documents in a careful hand. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to interest. "Can I help you folks? We need to file a land claim," Lucas said. "And we need to see Judge Morrison as soon as possible." "The judge is in Santa Fe this week," the clerk said, "but I can accept your documents and register them. That will make them part of the official record." Penelope stepped forward and placed the satchel on the desk. "My name is Penelope Ashford. My father was Robert Ashford, and these are the documents proving his ownership of a piece of land that is currently being claimed by Marcus Garrett." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Marcus Garrett? Miss, do you understand what you are saying?" "Mr. Garrett is a powerful man in this territory. I understand perfectly. My father was murdered because he would not sell his land. Now Garrett is trying to steal it by claiming my father never had proper title. These documents prove otherwise." The clerk looked uncomfortable, but he could not refuse to do his job. He began examining the papers, reading through deeds and bills of sale, witness statements and survey maps. As he worked, the door opened behind them and Penelope's heart stopped. Marcus Garrett walked into the courthouse like he owned it, which, given his influence, perhaps he did. He was a big man in his 40s, with silver-streaked hair and cold blue eyes. Behind him came 3 of his men, including Tom with his scarred face. "Well, well," Garrett said, his voice smooth as oil. "Little Penny Ashford, I have been looking for you." Lucas stepped slightly in front of Penelope, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "She is filing legal documents, Garrett. You have no business with her." Garrett's eyes flicked to Lucas, dismissing him. "Lucas Callahan, the ranch hand playing at being a landowner. This does not concern you, boy. It concerns me when you send men to hunt down an innocent woman." "Innocent," Garrett laughed. "She stole property that belongs to me." "Those documents are forgeries." "They are not forgeries," Penelope said, finding her voice. "They are genuine, and they prove my father bought that land 15 years ago. You have been lying about your claim, Mr. Garrett, and I intend to prove it." The clerk cleared his throat nervously. "Actually, these documents appear to be in order. They bear the proper seals and signatures. I am obliged to enter them into the official record." Garrett's face darkened. "Now you listen to me. That land is mine. I bought it fair and square." "From whom?" Penelope demanded. "My father never sold it. Show me a bill of sale. Show me any document with my father's signature agreeing to transfer the property." Garrett could not, and they all knew it. His jaw worked as he struggled to maintain his composure. "Your father was a squatter. He never had proper title." "Then how do you explain these documents?" She gestured to the papers spread on the clerk's desk. "Witness sales, recorded deeds, survey maps with my father's name on them. All dated 15 years ago, all properly filed with the territorial government." The clerk nodded slowly. "She is right, Mr. Garrett. I have checked the seals and signatures. These are genuine government documents. They predate any claim you might have filed." For a moment, Penelope thought Garrett might explode. His face turned red and his hands clenched into fists. But then his expression shifted, becoming calculating. "If that is how you want to play it, then fine. We will let the courts decide. But mark my words, girl, you are making a powerful enemy." "You made yourself my enemy when you killed my father," Penelope shot back. The room went silent. Garrett's men tensed, their hands moving toward their guns. Lucas and Henry did the same, and suddenly the courthouse felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. "That is a serious accusation," Garrett said softly. "One you cannot prove, not yet, but I will." The clerk stood up quickly. "Gentlemen, please. This is a courthouse, not a saloon. I will thank you to take any disputes outside." Garrett stared at Penelope for a long moment, then turned and walked out, his men following. At the door, he paused. "This is not over." When they were gone, Penelope sagged against the desk, her legs suddenly weak. Lucas put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said quietly. The clerk finished recording the documents with shaking hands. "Miss Ashford, I have to warn you. Garrett is not a man who accepts defeat gracefully. You should be careful. I know. But I will not let him get away with what he did to my father." They left the courthouse with official copies of all the documents safely in Penelope's possession. The originals would remain in the court's records, where Garrett could not destroy them. It was a victory, but it did not feel like one. Penelope knew the real battle was just beginning. "We should get out of town," Henry said, scanning the plaza nervously. "Garrett and his men are out there somewhere, and they are not going to be happy." But Lucas was looking at something across the plaza. "Wait, that is Sheriff Bradley. We should talk to him." The sheriff was an older man with graying hair and a weathered face. He stood outside his office, watching the street with the patient alertness of someone who had seen everything. When Lucas hailed him, he turned and nodded in recognition. "Lucas Callahan. What brings you to town?" "Trouble, Sheriff. This is Penelope Ashford, Robert Ashford's daughter. She has just filed a land claim that contradicts one of Marcus Garrett's holdings." The sheriff's expression grew serious. "I see. That is liable to cause problems. It already has. Garrett's men have been hunting her. They chased us through the mountains just this morning." "Can you prove that?" "We saw them, 3 of us as witnesses," the sheriff sighed. "Lucas, you know I cannot arrest a man like Garrett on hearsay. I would need solid evidence." "What about my father's death?" Penelope asked. "Everyone says it was an accident, but it was not. Garrett had him killed." "Again, Miss Ashford, I would need proof. Did you see it happen? Do you have witnesses?" "No, but then I cannot help you. I am sorry. I know that is not what you want to hear, but the law requires evidence." Penelope felt frustration boiling up inside her. "So Garrett can murder people and steal their land and no one will do anything?" "I did not say that. I said I need evidence. You have registered your land claim. That is a start. If Garrett tries anything against you now, it will look suspicious, and that might give me something to work with. In the meantime, watch your back. Garrett is not known for his restraint." They thanked the sheriff and walked back to their horses. Penelope felt defeated despite their success at the courthouse. What good were legal documents if Garrett could simply have her killed? "Do not lose heart," Lucas said, as if reading her thoughts. "You have accomplished something important today. Garrett cannot simply erase your father's claim now. The documents are on record. He will have to fight you in court. Or he will just kill me and forge my signature on a sale document. We will not let that happen." They mounted and rode out of Placida's, heading southwest toward Lucas's ranch. The sun was beginning its descent, and Penelope felt exhaustion pulling at her bones. She had not slept properly in days, and the constant fear was wearing her down. They were an hour outside of town when Henry spotted the riders again. This time there were more of them, at least 8 men spread out in a line, blocking the trail ahead. "They have been waiting for us," Lucas said grimly. "Can we go around?" "Not without going miles out of our way." And they would just follow. The riders approached slowly, confident in their numbers. Tom was in the lead again, his scarred face split by an unpleasant grin. "End of the line, Callahan. Hand over the girl and her papers, and we will let you and your brother ride away." "Not happening," Lucas said. "Then we will take her. 8 against 3, you cannot win this." Lucas's voice was steady. "Maybe not, but I guarantee some of you will not ride away from this fight. You feeling lucky, Tom?" Tom's grin faded. He knew Lucas's reputation. Everyone in the territory knew the Callahan brothers could shoot, but 8-3 were still bad odds. "Last chance," Tom said. Penelope made a decision. She could not let Lucas and Henry die for her. She had already cost her father his life. She would not be responsible for more deaths. "Wait," she said, urging her horse forward. I will go with you, just let them leave. Penelope, no, Lucas said sharply. It is the only way. I will not have your blood on my hands. She started to dismount, but Lucas grabbed her reins. Stop. You are not going anywhere with these men. You know what will happen to you. I know. But at least you will be safe. And you think I could live with that? You think I could go home and sleep at night knowing I let you sacrifice yourself? Their eyes met, and Penelope saw something in his face that took her breath away. It was not just determination or protectiveness. It was something deeper, more personal. Why do you care so much? She whispered. Because somewhere in the last day and a half I fell in love with you, Lucas said simply. And I will be damned if I am going to lose you now. Time seemed to stop. Around them, Garrett's men shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond to this declaration. Henry sat frozen in his saddle, his eyes wide. You barely know me, Penelope breathed. I know enough. I know you are brave and stubborn and loyal. I know you loved your father and you are willing to die for what is right. I know that pulling you out of that grain silo was the most important thing I will ever do in my life, because it brought you into my world. And I know that if we survive the next 10 minutes, I want to spend every day getting to know you better. Tears streamed down Penelope's face. Lucas, a gunshot cracked the air, but it did not come from Garrett's men. It came from the rocks above the trail, followed by several more in quick succession. The riders scattered, confusion breaking their formation. More shots rang out, and Penelope saw men appear on the ridge above them. 6 riders, all wearing sheriff's badges. Sheriff Bradley rode down from the rocks, his rifle still smoking. Nobody move. You are all under arrest for assault and attempted kidnapping. Tom and his men looked at each other in panic. They were caught between the sheriff's posse on the high ground and Lucas, Henry, and Penelope on the trail. Slowly they raised their hands. How? Penelope gasped. The sheriff rode up beside them, his weathered face creased in something that might have been a smile. I might have followed you out of town, just in case Garrett tried something. I brought some deputies along. We have been tracking this group for the last hour. Can you arrest them for threatening and attempting to abduct you? Absolutely. And if any of them want to testify against Garrett to save their own skins, well, that might give me the evidence I need to go after the big fish. Tom looked like he wanted to spit. Garrett will have us killed if we talk. Garrett will be in jail himself if you talk, Bradley countered. Think about it in your cell. The sheriff's deputies rounded up Garrett's men and tied their hands. Bradley looked at Lucas and Penelope. You two should get home. I imagine you have had enough excitement for one day. Thank you, Sheriff, Lucas said. I misjudged you. I may be old, but I am not blind. I have known for years that Garrett was trouble. I just needed something I could act on. Miss Ashford here might have given me that. They watched the posse ride back toward Placida's with their prisoners, then turned their horses toward home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. None of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Henry broke the silence. So, brother, you are in love, Lucas glanced at him. Apparently. That was quite a declaration, seemed like the right moment. Penelope felt her cheeks burning. Her heart was still pounding, but it was not from fear anymore. Lucas had said he loved her. He had said it in front of his brother and 8 armed men, said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. Lucas looked at her, his gray eyes soft in the fading light. Every word. We have known each other less than 2 days. I know it is insane, but it is also true. She thought about the way he had climbed into that grain silo without hesitation, risking his own life to save hers. The way he had stood up to Garrett without flinching. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare. I think I might be falling in love with you too, she admitted, Henry made a choking sound. Well, this is going to make dinner conversation interesting. But he was smiling, and when they reached the ranch, he tactfully disappeared into the barn to see to the horses, leaving Lucas and Penelope alone in the gathering dusk. They stood in the yard, suddenly shy with each other now that the danger had passed, and they had to confront what they had said. "So," Lucas began. "So," Penelope echoed. "I should tell you I am not good at pretty speeches. What I said back there, that is not usually how I talk. I liked it." "You did?" "Yes. It was honest. You meant every word, and I could feel that." Lucas took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I did mean it. I know this is fast, probably too fast. You can tell me I am crazy." "You are crazy," she said, but she was smiling. "We both are, but maybe that is all right. Maybe sometimes crazy is exactly what you need." He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I want to court you properly, take you to dances, bring you flowers, all the things a man should do when he is trying to win a woman's heart." "I think you already have my heart," Penelope whispered. "You won it when you climbed into that silo. Then can I kiss you? Or is that too forward? Lucas, you told a gang of armed men that you loved me. I think we are past worrying about being too forward." He smiled and bent his head, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. Penelope felt like the world was spinning, like everything that had been broken inside her was suddenly mending. This was what people meant when they talked about finding the right person. It was not just attraction or affection. It was a sense of coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. "Not just tonight. Stay here with us, with me. Let me take care of you while we fight Garrett in court. Let me be the person you lean on. People will talk. Let them talk. Or if it matters to you, we can get married. Tomorrow if you want. I know it is fast, but Penelope, I have never been more sure of anything in my life." She should have said no. She should have said it was too soon, they needed time, they had to be sensible. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was yes. Lucas pulled back to look at her. "Yes to staying or yes to getting married. Both. Either, I do not know. All I know is that I do not want to be apart from you. Is that insane? If it is, then we are insane together." Henry emerged from the barn, looking between them with amusement. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Lucas said. "No," Penelope said at the same time. Henry laughed. "I will take that as a maybe. Maria left a note saying she put together a cold supper for us in the kitchen. You two should eat something." They went inside, and over a meal of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, they talked about the future. Lucas explained that his ranch was doing well, that he had contracts to supply beef to the army fort near Santa Fe. He could support a wife, though life would not be easy. Ranch work was hard and money could be tight. "I am not afraid of hard work," Penelope said, "and I have my father's land now. Once the court confirms my ownership, I can sell it if I want. The railroad company would still pay good money for the right-of-way." "Is that what you want, to sell it?" She thought about it. "I do not know. Part of me wants to hold on to it because my father loved it so much. But another part thinks he would want me to use it to build a good life. What do you think?" "I think it is your decision. But if you did sell it, you could use some of the money to expand this ranch. Buy more cattle, maybe hire a couple of hands. We could build a real life here." "We," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Over the next few days, they settled into a strange new routine. Penelope stayed in the guest room, proper and correct, but she spent every waking hour with Lucas, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She helped Maria with the cooking and the washing. She learned to milk the cow and gather eggs from the chickens. Lucas taught her to throw a rope and to read cattle brands. Henry treated her like a sister, teasing her gently and including her in every decision about the ranch. Sheriff Bradley sent word that 3 of Garrett's men had agreed to testify against their boss in exchange for reduced sentences. They confirmed that Garrett had ordered them to kill Robert Ashford and make it look like an accident. The sheriff had arrested Garrett and charged him with murder. The trial was set for 3 weeks away in Santa Fe before a territorial judge. Penelope would have to testify, but with the documents she had filed and the testimony of Garrett's own men, the case seemed solid. "It is really over," she said to Lucas one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Garrett will go to prison, and I will get my father's land back." "Justice," Lucas said, "your father would be proud of you. I could not have done it without you." He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural and right. "We make a good team." "Lucas, about what you said, about getting married. Did you mean it, or were you just caught up in the moment?" He turned to face her fully. "I meant it, but I do not want you to feel rushed. We can take our time, do this properly." "What if I do not want to take our time?" His breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that life is short and uncertain. I learned that when my father died. Why wait for something we both want?" "Penelope Ashford, are you proposing to me?" She laughed, feeling giddy. "I suppose I am. So what do you say, Lucas Callahan? Will you marry me?" He stood and pulled her to her feet, spinning her around in a circle. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a week later in the small church in Placitas, with Henry as best man and Maria as witness. The ceremony was simple, just a few words before a priest, but Penelope felt the weight and wonder of them. For better or worse, in sickness and health, till death did them part. They were promises she made with her whole heart. Afterwards, there was a small celebration at the ranch. A few neighboring ranchers came by with food and well wishes. Someone brought a fiddle, and there was dancing under the stars. Penelope danced with Lucas, with Henry, with old men and young boys. But it was Lucas she came back to, again and again, drawn by an invisible thread that seemed to connect their hearts. When the guests finally left and Henry tactfully retired to the bunkhouse, Lucas carried Penelope over the threshold of their home. Their home. She still could not quite believe it. "Happy?" he asked, setting her down gently, deliriously. He kissed her, slow and deep, and she felt heat bloom through her body. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret you." Their wedding night was tender and passionate. 2 people learning each other, discovering what gave pleasure and what made the other sigh. Penelope had been nervous, but Lucas was patient, and by the time the moon set outside their window, she felt like she had been remade, transformed from a frightened girl into a woman who knew her own strength. In the weeks that followed, they fell into the rhythm of married life. Penelope threw herself into making the ranch house a home, sewing curtains and planting a garden. Lucas taught her to ride better, to rope a calf, to read the weather in the clouds. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, and at night they fell into bed exhausted and happy. The trial came and went. Garrett's men testified as promised, and the evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Garrett was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. Penelope watched the verdict with a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been done, but it did not bring her father back. Lucas held her hand through it all, a steady presence at her side. When the judge confirmed her ownership of her father's land, he smiled at her with pride. "What will you do with it?" he asked as they walked out of the courthouse. "I have been thinking about that. The railroad wants it and they are offering a good price. But I thought, what if we kept it? What if we used it to expand our herd? We could run cattle on my father's land and use our ranch as the home base. We would have enough grazing land for twice as many head." Lucas's eyes lit up. That is a brilliant idea. Are you sure? It is a lot of work. I am sure. My father loved that land. I think he would be happy knowing it was being used well, that it was helping us build a life together. So they kept the land and expanded the ranch. Lucas hired 2 hands to help with the increased workload. Within a year, they were one of the more prosperous small ranches in the territory. Penelope kept the books and managed the household, while Lucas oversaw the cattle operation. Henry became their foreman, taking on more responsibility as the ranch grew. The first winter was hard. Snow piled high in the mountains and they lost some cattle to the cold. But they survived, learning and adapting. The second year was better. And the third year, something wonderful happened. Penelope realized she was pregnant in the spring when the world was turning green and new. She told Lucas one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. "I have news," she said, unable to keep the smile off her face. He looked at her, reading something in her expression. "Good news, the best. We are going to have a baby." Lucas's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, disbelief, joy, fear, and finally a smile so wide it seemed to split his face. "A baby, really, really. Maria helped me count the weeks. I think it will be born in the fall, around October." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. "Penelope, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God every day that I decided to check that old grain silo." She laughed through tears of joy. "Best decision you ever made. Second best. The best was asking you to marry me." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Penelope had some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed, and she bloomed with health. Lucas was unbearably protective, trying to wrap her in cotton wool and keep her from doing any work. She had to firmly remind him that she was pregnant, not made of porcelain. Their son was born in October, during the first cold snap of autumn. The birth was long and difficult, but Maria and a midwife from town saw Penelope through it. When Lucas finally got to meet his son, holding the tiny, squirming bundle in his arms, tears ran freely down his face. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered. "What should we name him?" "I thought we could name him Robert," Penelope said. "After my father, if that is all right with you." "It is more than all right. Robert Callahan. It is a good, strong name." Little Robert grew quickly, a healthy, happy baby who had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Watching Lucas with his son, seeing the gentleness and love he showed, made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier but richer. The ranch continued to prosper. They added a room onto the house for the baby, and then another when Penelope got pregnant again, 2 years later. Their second child was a daughter, born in spring when the wildflowers covered the hills. They named her Sarah, after Lucas's mother. She had her father's gray eyes and a stubborn streak that showed up early. Henry married the schoolteacher from Placida's, a kind woman named Emma who fit into their family as if she had always been there. They built a house on the far side of the ranch and started their own family. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with both families gathering around a table that seemed to expand to fit whoever needed a place. Years passed, full and good. Robert grew into a serious boy who loved the cattle and the land. Sarah was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and catching lizards. A third child came, another son they named James, and then a fourth, a daughter they called Margaret. Penelope looked at her life sometimes and could barely recognize the frightened girl who had hidden in a grain silo all those years ago. She had built something real and lasting, a family that filled her heart to bursting. On the 20th anniversary of the day Lucas had pulled her from the grain silo, they rode out together to the old Hendricks farm. The silo still stood, weathered but intact, a monument to the day their lives had changed forever. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Penelope asked, leaning against Lucas as they stood looking up at the tall wooden structure. "Best 20 years of my life," Lucas said. "Though I still have nightmares sometimes about you sinking in that grain, about what might have happened if I had been 5 minutes later. But you were not late. You were exactly on time. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was. All I know is that climbing into that silo was the bravest thing I ever did, because it led me to you." She turned in his arms and kissed him, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long familiarity. "Take me home, cowboy, always." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the New Mexico landscape in shades of gold and amber. In the distance, they could see the lights of their home, could hear the faint sounds of their children playing. Robert, now 19, was teaching his younger brother James how to rope a post. Sarah, 17, was reading on the porch, probably neglecting some chore. Margaret, just 12, was helping Emma in the garden. It was a good life, Penelope thought. Not perfect, not always easy, but good. Built on love and hard work and the courage to take chances. Lucas's ranch, which had started as a modest operation, now sprawled across several hundred acres. They employed 6 full-time hands and brought in more during roundup season. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, market downturns and cattle diseases, but they had survived it all together. As they rode into the yard, Robert looked up from his roping practice and waved. He was the image of his father, tall and lean, with the same quiet confidence. He had been accepted to the agricultural college in Las Cruces and would leave in the fall, the first of their children to go to university. "Father, Mother, you are back," he called. "Margaret has been asking for you." They dismounted, and Margaret came running from the garden, her braids flying. "Mama, Papa, Emma taught me how to identify 12 different herbs today." Lucas scooped her up, though at 12 she was getting too big for it. "Is that so? Which ones?" As Margaret launched into an enthusiastic description, Penelope caught Emma's eye and smiled. Emma had become more than a sister-in-law. She was a true friend, someone Penelope could talk to about anything. Dinner that evening was loud and chaotic, with all 9 of them crowded around the extended table. Henry and Emma's 3 children, ranging from age 8 to 14, added to the happy chaos. There were arguments about who got the last piece of cornbread, debates about whether the new bull was mean or just cranky, laughter and storytelling, and the comfortable intimacy of family. After dinner, the younger children scattered to their various activities. Lucas and Henry stepped outside to discuss some ranch business, and Penelope and Emma cleaned up the kitchen together. "You look happy," Emma observed, washing a plate. "I am happy. Sometimes I think I should not be. So much pain in my past, so much loss. But I am. That is not despite your past. It is because you survived it. You took your pain and built something beautiful from it." Later, when the house was quiet and the children were in bed, Penelope and Lucas sat on the porch in the rocking chairs Lucas had built for their 10th anniversary. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, reaching over to take her hand. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." "We both are." She looked at him, this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it fully. Time had added lines around his eyes and threads of silver to his hair, but to her, he was as handsome as the day he had pulled her from the grain silo. "You remember what you said to me, that day when Garrett's men had us trapped on the trail?" Lucas smiled. "I said a lot of things that day. You said you had fallen in love with me, That pulling me out of the silo was the most important thing you would ever do. I remember. I meant it. I know you did. I just want you to know that every day since then has proven you right. You saved my life in that silo, but you gave me a life worth living after. You gave me home, family, purpose, love. Everything good I have is because you were brave enough to climb into that silo. Lucas's eyes were bright in the darkness. And everything good I have is because you were brave enough to let me help you. You could have stayed afraid, stayed alone, but you took a chance on me, on us. That took more courage than I can imagine. They sat in comfortable silence, rocking gently, hands intertwined. From inside the house, they could hear Margaret's voice raised in protest about something and Sarah's laughter in response. James was practicing his harmonica, the notes slightly off-key but enthusiastic. Normal, everyday sounds of family life. I hope they know how lucky they are, Penelope said. Our children, I hope they understand what they have. They will, Lucas assured her. Maybe not now, but someday. When they have children of their own and they look back on their childhood, they will understand. As if summoned by their conversation, Robert appeared in the doorway. Father, could I talk to you for a moment? Of course. Come sit. Robert settled on the porch steps, looking unusually serious. I have been thinking about the fall, about going to college. Having second thoughts, Lucas asked carefully. No, not exactly. I want to go, learn about modern ranching techniques and animal husbandry. But I also feel guilty about leaving. You need help here and I am abandoning you. Penelope leaned forward. Robert, you are not abandoning anyone. You are building your future. That is what your father and I want for all of you. Your mother is right, Lucas added. This ranch will be here when you get back, and what you learn at college will help us make it even better. Besides, Henry and I managed before you were born. We will manage for a few years while you are studying. You could come back and revolutionize our whole operation, Penelope said with a smile. Bring all that new knowledge and help us become the most successful ranch in the territory. Robert's serious expression cracked into a grin. You are just saying that to make me feel better. I am saying it because it is true. You have a gift for this work, Robert. You understand the cattle, the land, the weather. With education on top of that natural ability, you could do amazing things. They talked for another hour about dreams and plans and possibilities. When Robert finally went to bed looking much happier, Lucas squeezed Penelope's hand. You are a good mother. We are good parents, she corrected. Together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Robert went off to college and came back full of ideas, just as they had predicted. Under his influence, they modernized their breeding program and improved their herd quality. The ranch's reputation grew, and they started selling breeding stock to other ranchers. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with the son of a merchant in Placitas. She married at 20 and moved to town, where she helped her husband expand his father's general store into the largest mercantile in the county. James showed an aptitude for numbers and took over managing the ranch's finances, freeing Penelope to focus on other things. She started a small school for the children of ranch hands and neighboring families, teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic in a room they added to the house. Margaret became a nurse, studying in Santa Fe, and then returning to open a small clinic in Placitas. She never married, saying she was married to her work, but she seemed happy and fulfilled. Henry and Emma's children grew up alongside Lucas and Penelope's, all of them learning the ranch business, all of them part of one extended, loving family. Through it all, Lucas and Penelope remained each other's anchor. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. There had been hard times, moments of doubt and fear, arguments and reconciliations. But through everything, their love had remained constant. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that seemed to include half the county. The ranch yard was filled with tables and lanterns, music and dancing, food and laughter. Penelope, now 62 years old, danced with Lucas under the stars, just as they had on their wedding night. 40 years, she marveled. How did we get so old? We are not old, Lucas protested, though his hair was completely silver now and his movements a bit stiffer than they once were. We are experienced, she laughed and rested her head on his shoulder. I love you, Lucas Callahan, just as much today as I did when I was a frightened girl you pulled from a grain silo. More, I hope. We have 40 years of memories to add to that first day. You are right. I love you more. More than I knew was possible. Their grandchildren ran past, shrieking with laughter, chasing each other in some game only they understood. 6 grandchildren so far, with more likely on the way. The ranch that Lucas had bought with borrowed money and big dreams now supported 3 generations of family. As the party wound down and guests began to drift away, Penelope and Lucas found themselves alone on the porch again, in their familiar rocking chairs. The sounds of cleanup drifted from the house, their children and grandchildren working together. You have any regrets? Lucas asked quietly. About how your life turned out, Penelope considered the question seriously. I regret that my father died. I regret that I never got to introduce you properly, never got to see his face when we told him we were getting married. But as for the rest, no regrets at all, even the hard parts, the years when money was tight, the winter we lost half our herd to disease, even those parts. They made us stronger. They taught us what we were capable of, and we faced them together. That makes all the difference. Lucas nodded, satisfied. I feel the same way. Though I have to admit, there are days when I am grateful we are not in our 20s anymore. All that drama with Garrett, the fear and danger, I prefer this. Rocking chairs and grandchildren, peace. Family, knowing that we built something that will outlast us. They sat in comfortable silence until the sounds from inside quieted. One by one, their children came to say good night. Robert and his wife Clara, heading home to their own ranch nearby. Sarah and her husband Thomas, making the drive back to Placitas. James, who lived in the original bunkhouse that he had converted into a comfortable bachelor home. Margaret, staying the night in her childhood bedroom because she had come too far from town to drive back in the dark. Henry and Emma were the last to leave, walking the short distance to their house under a sky full of stars. Finally alone, Lucas stood and offered Penelope his hand. Bed. I thought you would never ask. They moved slowly through the house, blowing out lamps, checking locks. These small domestic rituals had become as natural as breathing over the decades. In their bedroom, Penelope sat at her dressing table while Lucas undressed for bed. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. An old woman looked back, her face lined with age, her once dark hair now silver white, but her eyes were the same, still bright with intelligence and spirit. What are you thinking? Lucas asked, climbing into bed. That I do not recognize myself sometimes. In my head, I am still that young woman you married, but the mirror tells a different story. Come here. She joined him in bed, settling into the curve of his arm where she had slept for 40 years. Lucas kissed her forehead. You are still that young woman, he said, just with more miles on you, more stories, more love given and received. You are beautiful, Penelope, you always have been. She snuggled closer, feeling safe and cherished. You have to say that, you are my husband. I say it because it is true. Though I will admit, you are even more beautiful now than you were at 22. Back then, you were lovely but frightened. Now you are lovely and strong, confident, at peace with yourself. That makes you radiant, sweet talker, truth teller. They lay quietly, listening to the night sounds. An owl hooted in the distance. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods. The house creaked and settled around them. "Lucas, thank you for climbing into that grain silo," he chuckled. "Thank you for not suffocating before I got there. I mean it. You saved my life that day. And every day since in 100 small ways. You have been my rock, my partner, my love. I could not have done any of this without you." "We saved each other," Lucas said softly. "I was just existing before you came into my life. Working, surviving, but not really living. You gave me purpose. You gave me family. You made me understand what love really means." Penelope felt tears on her cheeks, the happy tears of a life well lived. "We did all right, did we not? You and me. We did better than all right. We did extraordinary." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. Two old people who had spent a lifetime building something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. The years continued to flow, as they always do. Lucas and Penelope grew older, more frail, but they remained together. They eventually turned over the day-to-day operations of the ranch to Robert, content to watch from the sidelines as a new generation took charge. They spent their days sitting on the porch, entertaining grandchildren and great-grandchildren, watching the sun rise and set over land they had loved and nurtured. They told stories of the old days, of grain silos and narrow escapes, of falling in love fast and building a life slowly. Lucas died first, at the age of 82, passing peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. He simply did not wake up one morning, slipping away as gently as a sigh. Penelope grieved deeply but not bitterly. They had been given so much time, so many memories. It was a blessing, not a tragedy. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling them stories and passing on wisdom. She spoke often of Lucas, of how a moment of courage had changed both their lives forever. On a quiet autumn afternoon, much like the day her son Robert had been born, Penelope Callahan closed her eyes and went to join her husband. The family gathered around her were sad but not devastated. She had lived a long, full life, had known deep love and joy. At her funeral, Robert stood before the assembled crowd and told the story one more time. How his father had heard cries from a grain silo and had climbed in to rescue a frightened young woman. How that woman had become his mother, the heart of their family, the reason they all existed. "My father used to say that climbing into that silo was the most important thing he ever did," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "And my mother would laugh and say he had given her everything. But the truth is, they gave each other everything. They built a life together based on love, courage, and commitment. That is their legacy to all of us. Not just this ranch, not just the land and cattle, but the example of how to love someone completely, how to build something lasting, how to turn a chance encounter into a lifetime of joy." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, neighbors, friends, all of them touched in some way by Lucas and Penelope Callahan. So when you think of them, do not be sad, be grateful. Grateful that a young cowboy was brave enough to climb into a dark silo. Grateful that a frightened woman was brave enough to trust him. Grateful that, from that moment of courage, all of this was born. Penelope was buried beside Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a simple stone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was brave enough to trust." The ranch continued, generation after generation, the story of the grain silo becoming family legend. Children grew up hearing about the day their great-great-grandfather rescued their great-great-grandmother, about how love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances. The old grain silo at the Hendricks farm eventually collapsed, victim to time and weather. But before it did, Robert made sure to salvage some of the wood. He had it crafted into a table, sturdy and beautiful, that sat in the ranch house dining room. A table where families gathered, where meals were shared, where love continued to grow. And if you sat at that table and listened closely, you might almost hear the echoes of an old story. A story of courage and love, of a cowboy who climbed into darkness to save a stranger and brought her not just to safety, but to a whole new life. A story that proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out your hand to someone who needs help, because you never know where that simple act of kindness might lead. It might just lead to everything.